Three, two, one. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Kick Off Your Damn Heels. I am Dr. Teralyn and I have asked my friend and colleague, Missy Rankin, to join us today on a very important topic. Missy is a life and health coach and a stress management specialist. But today we're going to talk about dealing with emotional trauma. And I think the majority of people that listen to this podcast, and probably that Missy has worked with, has suffered some type of an emotional trauma, which puts them into an anxious state. So this is a super important topic. And Missy, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself and why this topic is so important to you?
Well, because I am the textbook example of what we're going to talk about. Now, I have my tissue here, people, because I'm a weeper. I'm a crier, okay?
She is. I've been on a podcast before, and we're both like bawling our eyeballs out, you know?
So I'm going to be professional, and I'm going to, But yeah, so I'm the textbook example, stuff in my childhood, my teenage years. And I kept thinking, I'm okay, when I'm an adult, right? It'll get better when I'm an adult. Well, then I was a single mom, and then my mom became disabled. Well, okay. Well, if I just marry somebody, then it's going to be okay. Okay. So then a blended family, that's a whole podcast in and of itself.
Truly.
So I did not know how to handle a lifetime of stress. And when I started realizing that my health was deteriorating because of stress, I thought there was this magic formula, right? There's this pill, there's this something that you had to do to manage stress. So every time I came across what we'll talk about and what you've already talked about on your show, eat right, exercise, get restorative sleep, deep breathe, blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's too simple.
No, that's not for me. That's not for me. If only all these things around me would change, then I wouldn't have to worry about eating right and right?
Exactly. Well, if my ex-husband and if my children and then my new husband and if my mom and I'm a believer, God, if you would just change all this. No, baby girl, you've got to change. You've got to go back and address it. Okay, so I'm getting way ahead of myself.
No, you're doing great, because my mantra is, what do you need to accept? What do you need to change? And what do you need to leave behind in order to manage stress? And it's the change part that people typically get wrong, because they look at it as changing somebody or something else outside of themselves. Yeah. So this is awesome. So carry on. Let's do this.
And really, if you want to know more about me, missyrankin.com/about. Okay, there it is. Because
that'll be in the show notes for everyone too. So
what I would like to do is, it really isn't so much about me and who I am. I'm a life coach. I help you with stress, Let's get in and help you. And the thing that's really on my heart right now is, we talked about emotional trauma, right? Mm-hmm. So please don't click off, because we're not saying that you have to go spend hours crying and you got to go relive every hurtful thing, and you got to go back and you got to do this, you got to do this. There is a time and a place for that. And some people do. Some personalities really do need to go back and need to go deep. And sometimes it's like, how you skip a rock? Sometimes you skip just down enough to go, oh, this is what happened. Address it, right? Look at it. Let it go. There's some forgiveness in there, but that doesn't happen all at one time, right? We're not saying, here's your 30-minute podcast, people, and at the end you're going to be better, right? No, it's baby steps done over time.
What do you think would be one of the first steps that people could do on their journey? Because I think you're absolutely right. And so I'm also a therapist and a coach, but when I do therapy, I do a lot of trauma therapy. And so many people don't want to go there because they are too afraid to open up all of those wounds that they once had. Like, the thought is, what is the purpose of doing that? Why do I need to relive these things? But what you're saying is that there are alternative ways to help you move through trauma, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so really, and I do wish we had a graphic right here, because how you have your OBGYN and you have your throat specialist and you have your sinus specialist. Okay. It really is healthy eating. Let's say for that person who knows they need help, but gosh darn it, don't make me tell you what happened with my
Right.
parents. I
Right.
don't want to talk about my mom. I don't want
Or
to
I
talk about
don't,
what my dad did to
or
me.
I don't want to blame them.
Right. Or I
I
don't
get
want to
that a
blame
lot.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to blame them because they were good, but
Right.
they were good, but okay. So the first baby step is awareness, right? And usually those traumatic events have caused health issues.
Hmm.
Chronic fatigue syndrome, there's a study, and I don't have it in front of me, is linked to adverse child experiences. They're
I
finding that
believe
out.
that. Oh, that's
You know,
the ACEs study. That would, yeah. Hmm.
The ACEs. And so let's maybe clean up our diet a little bit, baby steps. Let's learn how to sleep well, baby steps. Let's learn deep breathing, exercise, positive thinking. Just, I've got some things in my free gift we'll talk about later. I know you've got some stuff, you've got your free gift, but it's taking bite-sized pieces. How do you eat an elephant sandwich? One bite at a time.
True.
One bite at a time. So you take the healthy eating and you make a few choices. But in the back of your mind, there's that emotional trauma we got to get to. So maybe you kind of get your physical body up and going a little bit better. So then we can address your mental and your spiritual and your emotional side. And it can be as simple as journaling. I'm right-handed. I love left and right-handed journaling. So maybe that traffic jam triggered me because he grabbed my spot. Well, maybe that's a little bit deeper. You could write, why am I so angry that he pulled out in front of me? And put that pen in your left hand and answer that.
Oh,
And
that's interesting.
yeah,
That is really interesting.
you tapped into that inner child. Now I don't want to go too deep unless you want to, and I apologize to people. I realize we're all over the place,
Hmm.
but there's no one size fits all. I started with nutrition. I went to counselors and I felt like I had open heart surgery.
Right.
Oh, you've had your 45-minute session, payment exorbitant free, get out the door, go be a mother and go back to work. Excuse me, I just relived traumatic events from my childhood. Sew me back up.
Right.
But I'm now my inner child, and I didn't know. I'm my now inner child interacting as an adult. No.
Well, that's why when you were talking about just a minute ago about nutrition and sleep and all of that, here's my advice for anyone. Before you just show up at the therapeutic altar to work on your trauma, right?
Yeah, that's good.
Do work with that therapist or a coach on a tremendous amount of self-care first.
Absolutely.
So many people. So what you're talking about is self-care, and it's little bits and pieces in little chunks.
Yeah.
Before you address your trauma. And I believe in that. And then after, so I do EMDR therapy with my clients. After the therapy session is over, that's the hardest part. Like I always gauge, how good are you at self-care?
Yeah.
Do you do any of those things at home? And to be honest, I have a lot of people that will do yoga or mindfulness. And I'll be like, so great. Before you go back to work, before you do this thing, we can either do it in the session right now, or you can do it on your own. Most people do elect to do it on their own if they know how, right? So it's really the teaching of how to engage in self-care if you're going to be working on trauma. And I don't know that too many people look at nutrition as self-care for trauma. And it is, because it's more stress if you are, eating poorly, and that's a subjective term, or just not even eating anything good during the day. Right. So I think that's profound, Missy, to talk about it like that. So I don't know. And I'm taking over because I love trauma.
No.
I don't love trauma. I love
I
talking
know.
about trauma,
I do too. It's the trauma resolution. Okay, what people can't wrap their head around is, who am I? And I'm not degrading myself, and I'm not saying, oh, I'm such a bad person. What I'm saying is, I have no business being here talking. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, if you look at my past, I'm just a regular Jane. I'm just little old me from the South. That's who I am. But what I did is I saw that I was destroying my relationships, my children, my family, my friends. friends. And I knocked myself out of so many promotions at work. We talked about this earlier. I'm an incredibly smart airhead, but anyway, that's another story.
That was the
Yeah,
pre-conversation
that was
before
the
the conversation.
conversation. And I'm phenomenal at work until, or was, uh, until something stressful happened.
Mhm.
And then all that had happened to me from the past manifested. And
Or as I say, regurgitated.
that's why I did that right there.
Yeah.
That's
Ooh, this
exactly,
expelling of
that's
stuff.
exactly right.
Yes.
And I did not know what I did not know.
Hmm.
And so real quick, this is really strong on my heart. I do want to just, a lot of people know how to deep breathe. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, I want you to take some deep breaths in and some exhales out. And I want you to, even though, sometimes I get a little hyper because I'm like, oh, we've got 30 minutes and I want to give them the world, right? My main thing is I want to encourage you. Now, I've looked at your free gift and I love it. And I love your podcast. So there's your resource right there. She's sitting right in front of you. I've got my own resources, and you're graciously allowing me to give you my free book. And so real quick, my free book, because I just wanted to plug this so that to take the overwhelm off. My free book has 14 lessons. And I know we're not supposed to, I know, do you see our eyebrows, everybody? We're not supposed to have that many, but it's actually one of my manuals in my coaching session, how to eat healthy. I have a section on Don't Feed the Hobos, which is about chronic negative thinking. I've got one on restorative sleep, restorative self-care. So and the first one is deep breathing. Ta-da.
Right.
So
Easy peasy lemon
easy
squeezy. The easier the
peasy.
better, people. Like it's
Right.
yes.
So I don't want you to be overwhelmed, and I want us to dive back down into maybe why is this even important? Why do we have to go back or forward or whatever to address that trauma? And sometimes it really is just acknowledging it,
Mhm.
And trauma could be, and I've got my notes over here. Trauma could be you had a surgery. I remember
Oh yeah.
I was 2 years old in a hospital because I had some kind of stomach flu. I was in there for weeks, which that's a whole other story in and of itself. But it could be a natural disaster, a chronic illness, a divorce, and it can be abuse. And it can also be you had a parent who may have been abused physically, mentally, and emotionally, and they didn't know how to parent you. And maybe they did their best or whatever with their resources, but they yelled and they screamed and they didn't nurture you and whatever else. And trauma is what's traumatic for me isn't for you. And
Well, no,
what's
I wanted to say this for a minute because we always tend to look at trauma like, well, nothing major happened to me, because I think there's a lot of language around trauma that has to do with physical and sexual abuse and things, or abuse, right? So I'm going to share something that was traumatic, and it's taken me a long time to say this because it feels like it doesn't rank with other people's trauma, right? So one of my biggest events that happened, and this seems so weird to even talk about, but it changed the way I view myself, and I'll tell you how. So it was sixth grade solo ensemble, and I was playing the flute, and I was extremely nervous. Okay, so nervous. I felt like I had like a rock in my stomach, a giant rock. So I went in, and if you guys know what solo ensemble is, it's like you and a judge in a room, and you're playing an instrument, right? I was so stressed out that I couldn't get a single note out. Okay. I had been practicing this thing. It was The Entertainer. I remember like it was yesterday, and I remember the whole scenario. This was sixth grade, And so I'm playing like this. And I did the whole thing like, the whole thing. And in the end, the judge, and I was like, just livid, tearing up, whatever. The judge gave me a first place, like a pity first place. And he said to me, because I know you could do it if you weren't so nervous. Okay. So that started this whole trajectory for me that I didn't earn what I got. Okay. So the sense of worth and imposter syndrome started in sixth grade. So then when I got things like I'd try out for the school plays and I'd get the singing parts and all of this, in my mind, I was like, I didn't deserve this. I must have got it because I don't know why, So even things like that aren't your typical trauma, end up preventing you from doing what you want in your life, right? So that would not be a categorized trauma, people, but it is.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Now let me piggyback on the opposite, same scenario almost, and what happened different. So mine was in high school, avid reader, bookworm. I always had a book, and my teachers knew that. And I did my homework in most of my classes. But anyway, so I had to give an oral report on this book. I did it. I did it. I had my notes. I read the book. I got up there, almost threw up, and I grabbed a hold of the podium. And I was so nervous. I literally was rocking it. And the girl before me had read my same book. And here are my notes. Here are my notes in front of me. And I kept going, you know what she said. It's all what she said. But the one thing she left out was da-da-da-da and da-da-da. And I looked up at my friends and they're going, and the teacher's going, she gave me a good grade because she knew I did the work. So instead of the imposter syndrome, I got the victim mentality.
Oh,
and see, I got a badge for not trying to try real hard. So if I did the work, I tried, but I really didn't.
Right.
People
that's
would
fascinating.
excuse me. People would just, it's okay, baby. It's okay.
That's fascinating.
I'll take that ride any day. Not now. Just kidding, people. Because what that did is that set me up for like this business that I have the choice to binge watch Netflix is what I used to do, especially when my health was really bad. There's a certain game on my phone. I forgot the name of it now. I've leveled up like crazy because when I was so tired, it was TV or games or because sometimes I was so mentally tired I couldn't read, right? So take that mindset into a business and it's like, oh, that ain't going to work, right? And so my years of victim mentality, I don't have to really give it 100%. I'm 50 years old. In my late 40s is when I started this business. I'm having to undo years of learned behavior. I'm reparenting myself, if you will.
Yep.
So that I can come up higher in my business. I'm here to change. I'd like to say the world, but whoever comes across my path is really was what it is. And this is a part of it. Well, can I binge watch Netflix and get that done? Or do I have to do the work, right? And that's what we're talking about. So again, not to overwhelm anybody, doing the work could be adding more dark green vegetables to the day.
Right. And as you were talking, I'm thinking, okay, so if you're binge watching Netflix and playing Candy Crush or whatever the heck it was on your phone, you're probably just searching for dopamine, So, right, exactly. Searching for a real win. That tells you I'm going to do that again. And if you got the badge of honor for being a victim, not having to really win, I could totally see how that dopamine was not working for you. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And so even supplementing with tyrosine helps that fatigue and gives you a little bit of giddy up or just eating properly, So that's where this all starts. And people who have trauma are typically very fatigued. And, we talk about that adrenal fatigue. I also talk about it with the dopamine deficiencies, right? Yeah. And we don't usually look at that. We look at fatigue as being, well, I'm just depressed, and what am I going to do with that depression? I'm thinking, no, you need a big win. Yeah. You need a reward pathway really going on. Yeah. So it's fascinating. And the interesting part to me, Missy, is we had very similar experiences, but how we internally process those was extraordinarily different. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Mine continued with this, imposter thing. And I need to do more, be more, get more, whatever. I could never get enough praise to unwind the imposter syndrome, and it wasn't until I did my own work with EMDR that I was finally able to free myself from that, because even, people are like, well, you're so driven, you do all these things. I'm like, yeah, but that's exhausting. That isn't, if I was just driven and this is great, but I was driven for external reasons. It wasn't for myself. It was to finally not be this imposter that I had worked my way into a corner being, Right. So I always tell people, why do you think I have a freaking PhD, man?
I remember you saying that on my show. Yes. I remember that. I remember that. And
Yes.
isn't that fascinating how, personality types. And again, I do want to push the pause button on this. I have the L-tyrosine, and I
Yeah.
have that in there. And I don't recommend that people go, oh, they said that. Okay, let me go supplement,
Oh,
because
right.
there's the genetic component. Okay,
No.
there's all kinds of detoxing components. That's where we come in. That's where health coaches come in. We
Right.
have more than the 15 minutes to spend with you than the average doctor, right? So I won't go down that road.
But when
But
you hear words like that,
yeah.
research them,
Yeah, and that's true too. I was an avid researcher, so it's amazing. Back to the personalities, I can research all day long, but some people that overwhelms. Okay, if
Mhm.
you're that person that's an overwhelm, then you need somebody. If you're somebody that can research it, then run with it, because this personality thing, maybe you're the achiever and
Mhm.
I'm the helper.
Right.
And so the way I did it was completely different. And there's sanguine people, there's melancholy, caloric. I love that. And so it's our personalities. I'm highly sensitive. Thank God somebody finally put a label on that, because in my whole life I've heard, you're too sensitive, you're too sensitive. Actually, I am. I can smell. Okay, side note, my husband has a mold remediation company. I can smell the
Oh,
difference between penicillin, aspergillus, and Stachybotrys, which is the black mold. I can smell the difference. So highly sensitive people have highly sensitive senses. My hearing, it's like Superman or whoever it is that has the hearing. Is it Superman? I think he does.
the
Anyway,
bionic man.
yeah, or the bionic woman. I love her. Yeah.
Yeah, whoever it is.
My hearing, and okay, so that's a side note, but my smell, like I said. And so embrace who you are. Embrace, she's completely different than me. I'm not going to get a PhD. I'm too lazy. I'm not going to do it. Well, not only that, now I just don't even have the memory to do it. And back when I had the memory to do it, I'm fine being a secretary.
Do you want to know the worst part of the PhD was that I did work on myself and I was a couple years into the PhD at that point. And I was like, wow, I shouldn't even do this. Like, I get why I'm doing it. And then I'm like, nah, I've spent so much money. I just got to push through this
I got to
thing.
do it.
You know?
That's right. That's
So
right. And
I wouldn't
but
do
isn't
it again,
But look at the empathy that you have now. And that's why I became a health coach, is because my medical community, they were failing me. My
Mhm.
blood work was normal, so I don't have problems. I was a size 8 and went up to 200 pounds. My hair was falling out. My fingers were so cold, I had to put on winter gloves to touch my grandchildren. But I'm okay. And if I
Right.
just ate less, I'm okay.
Eat less and move more. I've heard
Eat
that my
less.
entire life.
And
Yes.
I was bedridden. I mean, I thought I was dying. There was one time I was taking a shower and I thought, how do I lift my arm up to shampoo my hair? And now, and this is not to overwhelm everybody, I study the mitochondria, because there's your powerhouse.
Mhm.
There's your energy producer. Well, nutrition, sleep, dealing with emotional trauma. It comes down
All
to
the
a
same
cellular
stuff.
level. It's
Yes.
in our muscles. I don't know if you can tell. Hang on. I don't know if you can tell. Can you see how my shoulders meet my neck instead of having shoulders like normal people? That's stress, people. No, literally, it really is.
I don't
It's
believe
years
it.
and years
Of doing this probably or
well,
holding
not
up.
only that, yeah, especially when I get tense and I'm a shallow breather. And so I'm having to work on that. And I don't know if you can tell, but I think it's this side. Of course, I don't know if it flips, but one of my sides are higher than the other. It gets into our muscles. And it's so very important to deal with our stuff on our own journey. And so that's so important. If you had met me 10 years ago, I was not in any position whatsoever to help anybody out. Not because I was not dealing with my stuff. I don't want to deal with it. I don't
Right.
want to deal with it. I'm going to sweep it under the rug and it's going to go away and I'm going to be fine. And I wasn't, and my health broke. So your journey, this one of the things I wanted to say is what's right on your path. Let's get rid of the overwhelm by drilling down to, here's my path. Here are two people who have been there and done that. And I bet we're not the only two speaking to you. I bet the universe or God or the divine or whatever you believe in is putting more people into your path. Deal with your emotional trauma. Deal with your this. Deal with your health. Let's focus on your health and just take it one step at a time. And it's all good. It's all good wherever you're at. It's all good.
So I think, one of the big morals of this conversation is, deal with all the self-care stuff, and then you'll be prepared to deal with the actual emotional trauma, right? Not flipping that around. If I only got rid of the trauma, then I could deal with this other stuff. And that's a really difficult concept
Yeah.
because people want to get rid of the trauma. But if you're not taking care of your body and your soul, you're not going to release the trauma the way that it needs to be released. Anyways, that's what I'm getting in this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you have to take care of yourself. And, as we're talking about this, like there's a lot of therapists and there's a lot of coaches out there now that don't deal with their own shit,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I think as a consumer, you need to be very mindful of, is your therapist, is your coach a healthy thinking individual?
Yeah.
Have they dealt with their own stuff?
Right. And don't judge from the outside.
I was just going to say that weight has nothing to do with
It's
it because, my body is so trashed with my
Right.
thyroid and adrenals that losing weight is so difficult for me.
Right.
But my husband will sit and say, he'll go, I don't get it, Terry, because, I sit here and eat, chips and whatever, and you're eating chicken, and salads and you know what I mean? Like I eat very clean and healthy overall. I mean, not 100% of the time, but overall.
Right.
But that doesn't mean, just because my appearance isn't like a, stick
That's right.
skinny or whatever, that doesn't mean that I haven't dealt with my own junk,
That's right. That's right. And I'll tell you, and you let me know where we're at on time, but
We got
one
about
thing,
5 minutes left.
okay, just real quick. It's amazing how my thing is practice what I teach.
Mm-hmm.
The magnitude and the weight of, if I want to help somebody, then okay, deal with your stuff, right?
Yep.
And we're constantly, I don't know about you, but I have a reaction. What's that about? Oh, okay. And it's not like I have to go relive everything that was done.
No.
And I'm not minimizing that because you may have to do that. But I journal about it. Oh, wow, I did not know. Look at there. That points back to here. And deal with it.
Well, here's the thing. Like, I'm almost 50 as well. And we have 50 years. 50 is going to rock, man. Anyway, we have 50, we have 50 years of experiences that are going to reemerge sometimes. And they don't always have to reemerge in a negative way. So if that experience in 6th grade that I had, if it reemerges now, it's just kind of like a subtle reminder of, oh, come on, fix your thinking for just a second. It has nothing to do with that now. This is now, that was then. So it's not like it has to come back up as a re-traumatizing, re-triggering event, and that's why we deal with our trauma. So that doesn't happen. It just becomes another thing that happened to us throughout the course of our life. And wouldn't it be wonderful if more people did that? Instead of just shoving it down, dealing with it later, but when is later?
Right.
I guess I would rather deal with it, when I'm 20, 30, 40, than deal with it when I'm 70,
Later is when your thyroid is enlarged and you have precancerous nodules. Later is when you're at a size 16 and weigh 200 pounds and you started off at a size 8. If I had dealt with it at a size 8, if I'd have dealt with my emotional eating, I didn't know I was an emotional eater until I was a size 16, that's what we're saying. That's what we're wanting you to bypass our learning curve.
Right.
Into you.
Because I do look at it like disease state, comes from excessive stress and trauma and things like that, because you're not taking care of yourself at all. So I would rather do this now before there is a solid disease state that's irreversible happening to me, So the moral of the story is deal with your shit right now.
That's it. Yeah. That's right.
That'll be the quote. That'll be the quote of the podcast.
Okay, there you go.
All right. So it's just so everybody knows, all of these resources are going to be in the show notes with links. So you can definitely get a hold of Missy because her stuff is going to be in there, including social media. So thank you so much for being on the show, Missy. And it was a pleasure, as always.
Yeah.
We need to have more trauma talks for sure because they're so important. So thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we will talk to you next time.
Thank you, everyone.